Hey, what's going on, you guys? My name is The Raptor, and it's been January for a while, meaning it's time for another Death Battle Dream season. Just like the last 3 years, I have called upon the assistance of my Discord server members to help collectively build this, while trying to avoid matchups used in those previous videos. If any of your favorite matchups aren't in here, they may be in there, so links to them and the Discord can be found in the description. But right before we start, let's set all the ground rules and general things to remember. This video is not meant to coincide with or anticipate Death Battle's official 2025 episodes. In fact, quite the opposite. Any episodes that have been confirmed to happen are not eligible for this season, but every single match in this season still came right from the brains of my Discord members. There will be 16 episodes in total. I know that's not how Death Battle will work each year going forward, but it's still the usual amount for the numbered seasons they did before. And while I certainly did not choose all my favorite matchups out of what was submitted, I did make sure to include an element of plausibility while narrowing things down. Gathering a collection of episodes like this requires not just looking at their individual qualities like relevance, likelihood, production potential, etc., but also stuff like how similar some matchups are and can we avoid that? Do we have enough that fits each of the animation styles? All that stuff that any season needs. But obviously we're not trying to be realistic down to a T. All things considered, I think we actually created a pretty wild season out of all this. Of course, there was also just a shit ton of submissions, so you can't put everything in. Still, big thanks to everyone who participated, but without further ado, we shall begin. Starting with the premiere, Lloyd Garmadon versus Takanuva, bringing in two very different series from what's been used before with a matchup that's been gaining popularity. Maybe a bit of an odd choice to start the season, although to be fair, most premiere matchups tend to be unexpected for better or for worse. It's the first full toy matchup since Starscream vs. Rainbow Dash, while also expanding into other forms of media the characters have been in, especially Bionicle. Lloyd has been thrown around a lot, and Takanuva is definitely not his be-all end-all opponent, but this fight brings something unique to Death Battle as a whole, and could be a lot of fun both thematically and practically. Like, just imagine the animation making what are essentially the literal toys fighting each other on their own. You can't say that wouldn't be cool to watch. Second on the list, Monokuma vs. Korosensei, one of the more recent Death Battle cast episodes and an impressive semi-finalist in the Tournament of Champions. Naturally, these things have boosted its popularity beyond where it already was, which makes sense to me as it has a lot of good qualities from a production standpoint. There appears to be some genuine tough talk surrounding this debate, which is always nice to come across, and the contents within the series themselves are quite captivating subject matter. I think the analyses could really benefit from exploring that. For some people, this would serve as their primary introduction to these worlds, which Death Battle has pulled off better in some episodes than others, but when it works, it tends to be very well received. And generally speaking, I think putting it real early in the season is more than fair and sensible. Next up, Zero vs. Meta Knight, an idea that's been talked about positively and negatively since the early years of Death Battle, and still holds a respectable level of relevance. It's less about insane specific powers, and more about the insane skills that belong to no-nonsense badass swordsmen. There's just something about the vibe of this kind of character that's so magnetic and fun to see in this context. As far as trying to include video games that are instantly recognizable to the vast majority of viewers, this is the one for this season. Plus it features two fan-favorite characters, one of which a lot of people want to see come back. It may not be your preferred for one or both of them, but you can't say it wouldn't get attention from the larger crowd, and that always plays an important part in choosing episodes. After that, Moon Knight vs. Azrael. Yes, we're moving straight from Meta Knight to Moon Knight, deal with it. There had to be some kind of Marvel vs. DC heroes fight in here, and thankfully this is one that still gets consistently thrown around in these types of discussions. It's a pretty popular street tier battle with familiar and unfamiliar elements from past episodes. It's one of those obvious comic ideas without feeling 100% pointless, especially since they don't fight the same way as a lot of the characters they interact with. The deeper you go into that stuff, the more worthwhile the episode will be. Some people really would prefer if Marvel vs. DC just drops off the face of the show. Obviously, we can't do that here, but a good mix of popularity and quality is how to do it, and hopefully makes it stomachable for those frustrated people. Moving right along, Pete the Cat versus Bluto, a matchup that everyone is kind of aware of, but doesn't always stand out among amongst its cartoon competition. These would be among the oldest characters ever used on the show, and I think that variety is also important for building a season, not just the media formats or character archetypes, although the archetype these guys fall under is also quite unique. You could definitely call this our season's True Blue Toon Force matchup, but this time with a nasty antagonistic twist, which we really haven't been able to see that combination of before. These are also elements that have historically worked for Death Battle very well, so putting them together feels logical for taking things up a notch. It's not a most wanted fight for many, but you gotta admit it's a pretty perfect comparison in a lot of ways. Changing things up a bit, Lucy Heartfilia versus Aleer. I have the female Aleer pictured here, but I guess it doesn't really matter. These are two series that I very much think could benefit from a return, one of them because it could really use a great episode, and the other because it only has one, and there is way more to cover within it for obvious reasons. And as I've said before, I think comparing fighters who are similar but also possess clear differences in their abilities or strengths makes the encounter a lot more interesting. Because yeah, they can both summon a lot of powerful creatures, but what they personally rely on in scenarios like this is way different. And really, anything that can get people talking more is beneficial for engagement. So I think it fits well here and utilizes the characters well, if you put the right scale into it, of course. Following that up, Loki Laufeyson versus Kefka Palazzo, a magical, godly, and wonderfully evil confrontation burdened with such glorious purpose. While I'm personally more partial to Q versus Mr. Migdis-Pitalik, I am very fond of the overpowered trickster archetype in general, and this has grown to be a very prominent one of those. The personality that would ooze out of this episode is simply one of the greatest for this show, even better when you throw fantastical abilities into the mix. Plus, this matchup really allows Death Battle to explain things they haven't really gotten to before, like other Final Fantasy games and how the gods of the Marvel franchise differ from one another, and that's better than always rehashing the same stuff. It can be interesting, but also just as fun as some of the really good past episodes. Overall, a recipe for success. Heading into our mid-season finale, Hiccup and Toothless versus Hero and Baymax, a lighthearted and feel-good choice that will inevitably end in double murder. But seriously, this is a textbook example of how to incorporate the characters' strong interpersonal relationships in the analyses, which every season needs at least a little bit of. Aside from my personal biases, I do think this matchup has enough special stuff to deserve an episode spot like this. A beloved 2v2 fight which we haven't gotten in a long time, the first ever Soul animated movie matchup. This would be a big deal to a lot of people, even if this isn't their favorite. And yes, these franchises are pretty well finished, but not every episode has to stick to what is most relevant, as long as its other attractable qualities make it worthwhile, and well, you guys know my thoughts there. Beginning our second half, Lord Boros versus Battle Beast. You definitely need something attention-grabbing for this episode spot, and I think this would be very effective as such. I can see the analyses being similar to Beerus versus Galaxia, where you may need to dive into each verse as a whole to fill some time, but that's no downside by any means, especially if you let these guys really shine in the animation. Because I know we're all very happy that Death Battle pays more respect to the combatants they use now, but there is a part of me that still waits patiently for those brutal bloodbaths, and thankfully this fight could easily do both. I think all fans of these series could be perfectly satisfied with how it all comes together. It's fun, it's cool, it's raw as hell, it fully embodies the purest form of a battle to the death, so I think it fits right in with the rest of the season. Up next, Kazuma Sato versus Subaru Natsuki, half of the original Isekai Quartet series coming to play. Kind of like Pete versus Bluto, we are flipping a very common Death Battle tradition. We get a thoroughly discussed anime protagonist fight, but this time leveraging the light novel side. It's a fight where the concept of immortality can make things more complicated than perhaps they would be otherwise. Whether or not you like that kind of debate, it has kind of been a staple of the show for quite a while now. I will admit its likelihood is really uncertain as it conflicts with a Tournament of Champions entry, but I'm not going to say no to every matchup that happens to be that way. In a vacuum, this is still a moderately well-known and supported fight that brings unique elements to the table, and by and large, that's going to hold more of a priority for a hypothetical like this. After that, Indominus Rex versus Sharktopus, probably the biggest WTF matchup found in here, and for good reason. This fight is so stupid, but it's delightfully stupid to the point of coming full circle with its potential as an episode. It takes us more into the live-action movie realm, while still maintaining that sense of craziness most viewers come to expect from the show, and it's one of those matchups made just to have a fun, buck-wild time. As long as we are willing to embrace the silliness, a nonsensical, over-the-top fight is more than satisfactory. I can't imagine it being particularly difficult to analyze either. You know, sometimes you just need something a little more laid back that you don't need to think about too hard while you're watching it. And with how much eye candy this fight could give us as well, I say what the hell. Moving down the line, Cobra Commander versus Red Skull, a villainous leader debate with strong themes of tyranny and unfortunately familiar ideals. What looks like a simple street tier style matchup actually has a lot more under the surface if you include the right stuff. I personally envision this as more of an army battle, you know, all of Cobra versus all of Hydra, which allows it to stand out from the rest of the season in a way that's fitting to both sides. In the interest of getting as much unique stuff in here as possible, this one's hard to pass up on, and with this we get more toy characters and an opportunity to tackle two of the most notorious terrorist organizations in all of fiction. Some touchy subjects would have to be navigated, yeah, but it's still the definitive matchup in this realm of ideas. Now for the traditional Halloween episode, Sans versus the Judge. Yes, we're moving straight from Red Skull to White Skull, deal with it. It's a highly anticipated matchup for not just Halloween, but also in general, as the Tournament of Champions has proven, and as you all could guess, I have no issues reserving a spot for prominent indie games. It would probably be the most unique in terms of how it's presented, what you physically see in the animation and the characters' methods of combat, which of course you need to be 100% sure you can pull off properly. But when going off of best case scenario for this video, I am confident that it would deliver on its primary goals and do another job Death Battle is really good at doing, getting people interested in the series they use. It's got the good qualities, and people will be talking about it until it happens anyway, so it's an easy spot given. Making our way to the last few, Bobobo-Bo versus Uncle Grandpa. Yes, I am serious. This would absolutely be the divisive one. Some would see this as just a stupid idea and would probably get angry about it, whereas others who have participated in legitimate discussions surrounding it would probably go nuts for it. And sometimes the final product is good enough to get the more negative crowd on board in these situations, but other times their opinions just can't be changed. But no matter what, with the limitless, weird-ass potential this matchup has, I think if Death Battle liked it enough to actually do it, they would put their heart and soul into it. This matchup is here to be the sleeper hit, the one that is simultaneously fun and super respectful to the characters in the way that it is fun. We've had episodes just like that before, it's fine for this season to have one too. For our penultimate episode, Aya Brea versus Jill Valentine, moving away from the comedic insanity of the previous one and closer to good old grounded intensity. As such, the tone is ultra important here, which is a double-edged sword. It could either fall on its face or elevate the experience by recapturing the emotions felt in each game's gameplay. And as we've seen with Leon versus Frank, we know Death Battle doesn't need to save every remotely spooky episode for Halloween or Valentine's Day. Bad joke, I'm sorry, but really, a lot of those matchups are just good as normal matchups and deserve to be treated that way. You all probably know it's not my most wanted fight in this particular subgenre, but it still has all the main appeals you need for something like this, and I think Death Battle has the ability to pull it off in the right way. And of course, for our season finale to wrap things up, Dr. Manhattan versus Richard Nixon. I get it, not really everyone is on board with analog horror on the show, and you could say this is a bit of a stretch to be a finale in the first place. But honestly, we know Death Battle prioritizes shock value for some of their final episodes, and no matter what, this one has all the presentation elements to be worthy of such an event. From the powerful and astronomical to the ideological and philosophical, and political, I guess. This is overall the most high-concept episode I think we would be getting for a really long time. I like to think this whole season pushes the envelope a bit and includes some new things, but this one does it in the biggest and most fascinating way, so I see no better pick to leave the final note in this collection. I can only hope you agree. And that concludes our Dream season for this year. Once again, thank you to everyone in the Discord who submitted for this. You certainly did not make my job easy, but it was still a lot of fun. To everyone else, you can find the link to the server in the description below if you want to join and participate in events like this. And of course, like, comment, subscribe if you want to see more on the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Have a great day, and peace out.